Excellence, and I'm glad you're here tonight. Welcome to Cohort 1, our second meeting. As you know, our first meeting, we spent a lot of time just talking about the nuts and the bolts of the initiative and so forth. And tonight we're going to get to dig into some of the fun stuff about teaching and learning. I'll be presenting for just a few minutes on some assessment strategies and considerations that we might want to have when we're designing a course. And then Greg Kunzweiler, our assistant director for the center, is going to really get into some awesome active learning strategies. We also have with us tonight Daniel Jordan from the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence, and he'll be monitoring the chat and just providing lots of moral support and assistance. Greg's having a little bit of trouble with his microphone, so he's working on that now, and hopefully he'll be on board with us in just a minute. How are you doing, Greg? Your mic working?
I think so, after a restart and 3 restarts on my headset, so I think I'm good.
Wow.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Okay.
You sound terrific. You sound terrific. I just wanted to say a few things that might have come up in the meantime from last week's meeting. I don't know if you have had an opportunity to access your course shell yet. Recall that Learning Design has created the master course shells for each of the courses that's being converted to hybrid, or that you are developing into a hybrid course. But they will only develop one master shell. It gets a little crazy if they have multiple master shells of the same course, and then they have to figure out which section gets which master and so forth. So if you are one of several people or one of 2 people designing the same course, but 2 different people will be teaching it and designing your own version of it, then you'll want to get with your faculty development specialist, our teaching and learning specialist at the center, and we will create a sandbox course for you, which is essentially a master course shell, except it's not considered master by Learning Design. It'll be your course shell for your course content. You'll develop the whole course in that sandbox course, and then we'll just help you copy that over into your spring section once that section is created for you. You don't want to put anything in the spring section right now, even though those might already be sitting out there, because they will do a course copy over, Learning Design will, and it'll take out everything you've been working on. So do not work in a spring section that's already developed, because that gets manipulated and used and changed, and then you'll lose the work that you'll be doing. So don't stress about it. We'll, just contact us and we'll make sure you're in the right course shell to develop. If it says your course name and number and hybrid, you're in good shape. If it doesn't, then you'll want to check with us and we'll help you find it, or we'll create a sandbox for you for the development of your course. So just kind of wanted to make sure that you were on the same, you were aware of that. And again, to really encourage you to reach out to your team member from the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence. Each faculty member that's developing a hybrid course has been assigned a team member. They've already reached out to you via email, and they are available and ready to support you in any way that you need. This is your opportunity to develop the course you want, and we're here to just help make that happen. So we're not serving as learning designers per se. We don't have a process like theirs, but we can help you create and develop the things that you want to in the course shells that you have. So with that, I'm going to start talking a little bit about assessment just for a few minutes, and then turn it over to Greg. So when we think about assessment, we don't often think about that as an active learning strategy. And yet it really can be a powerful active learning strategy. Let's talk a little bit about what we use assessment for. What are the purposes of it? We typically think of assessment as an end product. They take a test, they do a paper, they complete a project, whatever it is, that's what assessment is. But actually assessment's much more rich and sometimes complicated than that. You know, I'm going to look at 3 different purposes for assessment here. One is, you know, we can use assessment to actually get baseline information about where our students are on something. Do they have the skills we need to move on? What's their prior knowledge, sort of thing. So that's sort of surveys, polls, that kind of thing that might happen before you teach something, to give you some valuable information about where you need to spend the most time or where they need the most support. Perhaps the richest form of assessment is formative assessment. Formative assessment is just that. It forms the student's learning. It helps the students during the learning process, not at the end. We often say it's assessment for learning instead of assessment of learning. And this can come in the form of feedback. It can come in the form of homework that may be graded. They may get feedback on. I'll give you a number of examples of this. But the important thing about it is that you are helping the student gauge where they are during the learning process so that they can make corrections before the end of the learning process. It's often said, or sometimes said, that formative assessment is to summative assessment what a physical is to an autopsy. You think about that for a minute. So a physical gives you really important information to make changes so you can get better. You go to the doctor and you find out your cholesterol is high, and you know you can do something about that. You can diet, or you can exercise, or if need be, you could take medication. If your blood pressure is high, it's the same thing. That's really valuable information to help you gauge where you are so that you can do something about it. And formative assessment does that very thing. It lets the student know where they are so they can do something about it to improve in their learning. Summative assessment, if we compare it to an autopsy, not to say that, you know, it's a horrible thing. I mean, maybe an autopsy is, but the thing about summative assessment is the student doesn't have an opportunity to make changes afterwards. That's it. It's just an assessment of their learning. It's usually an end of unit, end of course, end of teaching period tool that basically says, well, how'd you do? Did they get it? But it's typically not accompanied by opportunities to correct. So 3 different ways of using assessment. Basically, they happen during these stages: before you teach something, while you are teaching something, or during the instructional process, and then after you have finished teaching. So let's look at some examples of those kinds of assessments. So formative assessments can take place like quizzes. Some of you use Cohort. You can use that either in a virtual environment or you know, on ground. Same thing with exit tickets. You can use those on ground, out the door. Before you leave out the door, here's your question of the day. You know, what's the most important thing you learned today? How does this apply to your life? How does this apply to the content? You know, just some kind of a question that helps the student sort of summarize or pull together what they got out of that lesson. It helps the students sort of self-assess what they know about what you taught that day. And it also gives you really valuable information about whether they got it or not. Again, you can also do that in Zoom. You can do exit tickets in Zoom, whether it's through chat or Padlet or another tool. Polling in class gives you a great gauge on where your students are. It also lets them know, especially if you let them see the poll, you know, where they are, you know, in terms of the rest of the class. 1-minute papers are a terrific way of, you know, students, again, summarizing, consolidating the information they learned. Gives them information about whether they really got it, you information about whether they really got it, whether you need to reteach it. Homework and classwork, infographics, charts, lots and lots of ways of giving students opportunity to interact with the content and find out whether they're on target or not. So summative assessments tend to be more standardized, not always, and we'll talk a little bit about authentic assessments and traditional assessments, but they typically take the form of, you know, end of unit tests, end of chapter tests, end of course tests, midterm exams, papers, sometimes projects, portfolios, and so forth and so on. So these are very different kinds of assessments, and it's really important that you've incorporated both, that you don't just rely on those summative assessments. And I'm sure that you're not. I'm sure you're doing a lot of other things along the way and not just testing. If we look at different kinds of tools, electronic tools that people use for formative assessments, they include things like, again, polling, tools like Poll Everywhere, there's polling in Zoom and so forth. Microsoft Forms is a great tool for having students fill out a form or like a survey. Of course, there are survey tools in, and a survey tool and a quiz tool in D2L. We can help you set those up if you're interested. I mentioned Zoom polling. There's self-assessments in D2L. You can also create self-assessments, whether those are in Zoom, online, or on ground. Nearpod, Greg's going to show you a little bit of that today, and that is an awesome tool for formative assessment. Another survey tool, SurveyMonkey. Again, many of you using Kahoot, Socrative, Google Forms. And rubrics are not so much an electronic tool, although they can be electronic, but they're an awesome tool to help students gauge whether they're hitting the mark. Instead of guessing what's in the professor's head, they actually have a scoring tool that shows them these are the criteria you will be measured on, and these are the points that you'll get based on those criteria. And there is a terrific rubric tool in D2L. I'm a convert to that. I even do my discussion posts in there with that tool, and everything almost has a rubric. And it's so helpful because it really helps students know exactly where they missed the mark. But more importantly, they know before they miss it, what they should be targeting at. So those are really awesome tools. Greg's going to talk to you a little bit about the power of authentic assessments. I've already mentioned that traditional assessments tend to be more standardized. You know, everybody takes the same test. They're tested on the exact same items, multiple choice, true, false, that sort of thing. They're more, they can provide useful data about, you know, the kinds of things students are frequently missing, but they are only a one-shot deal. It just gives you a snapshot of the content that you have covered and that they are learning. Authentic assessments tend to be much more holistic. They're more complex. They require more complex thinking and higher order thinking typically. And they're usually tied to the realities of the profession or the content area in the real world. So for instance, maybe your students are biology students and they're studying the impact of seagrass on manatee survival. And they've looked at all the ins and outs about the importance of seagrass, the impact that it has, how it impacts, you know, manatee survival. And so they take all of this information and they write a proposal to a state legislator who they're hoping will take action on this. And so they include all the critical elements in there. That's an authentic assessment. That is a real world application of the content that they're learning. And those kinds of applications can happen in business courses and education courses and English courses and, you know, all across the disciplines. But those tend to be the ones students remember because they have to wrap their head around all of the content of that unit or that subject and turn it into something meaningful. And we know from cognitive science that the brain is constantly looking for meaning. And so when they can tie that to something that matters and is in their real lives, those authentic assessments can be very powerful. And these are just some references. We'll put these slides in the Microsoft team. And these are some resources that you might find helpful. But I'm going to turn it over to Greg now because he's really got some awesome stuff for you tonight.
All right, great, Candace. And that's a great segue right into active learning and learner engagement. So before I go on with this part of it, I do want to, and I'm going to share this with you real quick, make a quick public service announcement here for a session that we have going on tomorrow at 1 o'clock. It's a faculty panel. So some of your colleagues are actually going to be participating in an active learning discussion tomorrow. And so don't miss it if you can. Go ahead, here's a link in the chat. You can go ahead and just register real quick. You just put in your name and email address and then add it to your calendar and you're good to go. But I'm excited because I know some of the faculty that are going to be sharing and some of the stuff they're going to be sharing. It ties in really nice with what Candace and I are talking about tonight with assessment and with active learning. So, all right, let me go ahead and we're going to do something a little bit different. And we're going to use a tool, and any tool is only as good as how you use it, and it's not the means to an end. And this session isn't about this tool, but it's about showing you all some active learning strategies. So what we're going to do is I'm going to post in the chat area a particular link, and I'm going to have you all join me in just a second. But let's do this. Has anybody here used Nearpod before with their students, or participated in a Nearpod session? And you can use the reaction tool down below. So if you can see the reaction, I can give a thumbs up if I've used it or not. Okay, great. So this looks like it, for most people, this will be the first experience using Nearpod. So here's what we're going to do. Let me go ahead and give you the link. What you'll do is you'll click the link. It'll open up your browser. So if you have one screen, then you'll just have this up. If you have two screens, then you can have up the cameras on one side and this on the other, because I'm not going to share my screen because I'm going to get you all active in the class. And so I'm going to be asking you all for some feedback as we move forward through active learning. And I'll wait a few minutes and make sure everyone can get in, because you just plug in your name. You can just put your first name if you want. And then once you do that, then you should be able to come directly into the Nearpod presentation. So I'll let you all go ahead and come on in. So what we're actually going to be doing, basically, and I'll just do this real quickly. This particular tool actually created a PowerPoint presentation, uploaded in it, and just added interactivity. And you'll see some of the interactivity that goes right along with what we're going to be talking about tonight. So I'll give you all about 10 more seconds, and then we'll go ahead and move forward with it. This to me, I think Nearpod is one of my favorite tools to use to actually segue, and we're only going to be scratching the surface on what the potential of the tool is. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward in the interest of time. So this first screen that's going to pop up here is what is active learning. And so what I want you to do here is just down below, just list one word that describes active learning. So put that in there, go ahead and hit the post button. If you really want to be adventurous, you could actually even click that little blue button that looks like a little image icon. And if you click that, you could actually even post an image if you wanted to. So this is similar to, some of you have used Padlet before. This is similar to using Padlet. All right, so great. Looks like we got engaged learning, engagement, ownership, hands-on. There's a good picture of some people collaborating, so that's good. Interaction, exciting, collaboration, good. Brain engaged, participatory activity, active learning, good. Motivating. Fun, absolutely. That's what we want in our classes, right? There's a person having fun there. You're like, yeah, all right, let's go. Woo, you know, like, and so, you know, hopefully, you know, when you start to look at active learning and dive into it, you know, these words start to catch your eye. You know, if we look at really, you know, there's active learning, and we look at just learning in general. I've been going through this book called Powerful Teaching, and they actually break learning down into 3 simple segments. It's encoding, it's storage, and it's retrieval. And so when you think about creating an environment where students can learn, you think about wanting them to be able to encode, to take that content in, to understand that content. You want them hopefully to be able to store it, you know, so they've learned it and be able to then ultimately be able to retrieve it. There's a lot of research, and this book is really powerful and rich with a lot of activities around getting the students to retrieve what's been stored, in their brain, the stuff that they've been learning. And some of the activities that we're going to touch on tonight are perfect for retrieval activities, having the students take what they've already learned and push it back out, and stretching that in different ways. So let's take a look at active learning. Let's see here. Okay, there we go. So what is active learning? And this is just a simple definition that I put. It's an instructional method that actively involves students. So it actively involves students in the learning process. We really want them to be involved in that learning process. All of us, everyone here, it teaches some great content, for their discipline. And we want the students to be actively involved in that process of learning it, and using a variety of learning strategies. And I'm going to show you a whole myriad of different ones. But what I'm going to ask you all to do tonight is to participate with me and share out some of your great ideas that you're doing. And so let's take a look at just some general strategies. So when we're just thinking about, okay, you know what, now I want to set up and I want to do some active learning strategies. What should I think about first? And so the first one, and I think one of the highest priority ones, is to provide a safe environment for students to engage in the class. One of the things that we're going to touch on next week, Candace and I, is about building classroom community, building an environment that students can come in and be able to learn and have a safe environment, and hopefully an enriching environment. One of the things that I prioritize with my class, and I tell them on the day one, I say, one of my goals here, by the time you leave this class, that you've made multiple friends in this class. I want them to be connected to the other students in this class. And so that's one of my priorities, going forward. And so I'm going to build activities that are going to allow for the students to get to know one another in the class. The next one is just building active learning activities every 20 minutes or so. There's research, brain research, when you're sitting down after about 15 or 20 minutes, things just start to shut down, and you're getting distracted and everything else. So we want to figure out different activities that we can build in every 15 or 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be a 10 or 20 minute long or 30-minute long activity. It could be something as simple as just asking them if they're understanding, get them to start to react to a few things, answer a question or two, and then you can start to go back into your lecture if you need to. But getting them engaged in the class absolutely keeps them, especially when they don't know when it's coming. My students never know when I'm going to be able to I'm going to decide to throw something out, and that they're going to have to give me something back. They're going to have to retrieve something and then give me something back. Then think about the instructions that you put together for your activity. Make sure they're produced in a way that the students can understand it. Make sure your materials are prepared ahead of time. Use a variety of different strategies, and we're going to go through a lot of different strategies, and I'm sure you all are going to share some great ones as well with us. And then the last one that we really want you to take a look at, and as we go through these, be looking from the lens of, is it face-to-face? Could it be Zoom? Or could it just be straight up online asynchronous? So be thinking about that, because a lot of these can go multiple ways. Some can go all three. Some are going to be where it may start asynchronous and you give the students to do something, by themselves, and then they come back. And then there's 2 more steps they have to do in class with other students. And so definitely be thinking about that as we go through these different strategies. So here's how we're going to break this down. We got 5 different areas that we're going to look at. The first one is called think breaks. The next one is called student responses. The third one is called student creations. The fourth one is group activities, and the last one is simulations. And so we're going to take a look at each one of those, but be thinking about, especially as I give you some more information about each one, what are some of those activities that I currently do, I've done in the past, or maybe some that I want to do, I just haven't done yet with my students that fit the bill for some of these. So let's take a look at think breaks real quick. So think breaks are just an opportunity for the students to stop and to think about something, that whether something that you've taught them already or something, a question that you gave them. It could be thinking about something that they may have known already, maybe, you know, something that they are already know about, but you're wanting them to stop and think about and actually whether they write it down, whether they share it out with somebody else. There's different ways of getting the students to just stop and think about it. It's where, you know, when I was talking about the retrieval practices and how powerful those are, think breaks are absolutely an integral part of being able to allow those students to be able to think about and actually put it down on paper, what they've already learned. So the question to you all is, what think break activities have you used in your course before? So go ahead and type out, or what I would even love better, if you want to, you can come off mute and then just tell us some of those think breaks that you've already done before in your class. All right, great. So we have quick writes, do first activities, good. 1 minute paper, good. To share with a partner, absolutely. Analysis, line, form, color, mass, texture, good, absolutely. Discussion questions individually and in groups, good. Muddiest point, it's always interesting. And then do it yourself. Does anybody want to share out about what they put up? I won't call on anybody yet, maybe on the next one. Great, we have scenarios, that's a good one. Pair, share, and post on an integrative slide, okay, good. Parking lot, being able to put everything on your parking lot, that's good. And just so you all know ahead of time, so I'm actually going to capture all of this. The entire slide deck is going to be posted in our team, but I'm going to capture even these slides as well that you all are producing here. And I'll be sharing those out as well with you. All right, so let's go ahead and move, add, delete, expand. That's cool. I didn't realize. So how do you, can you tell us a little bit about that, Patrick? Do you mind?
Can you hear me, Greg?
Yes, I can. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I do it sometimes with like a writing exercise. Like if they grab someone else's paper and they, you know, it's just like a quick way just to sort of analyze something, and you know, just in like 5 minutes, they can underline something they would move, something they would add to, something they would delete, something they would expand. So.
All right, that's cool. I like that. I like that one. I like the acronym MADE. So that's cool. All right, so let's see here. All right, let me go ahead and move on to the next one. So here are a few ideas that I have from think breaks. So the first one is a 3 minute paper. Somebody mentioned a 1 minute paper. This is basically the same thing, where you're just discussing, having the students take 3 minutes out of their time and they're writing down something. Now, whether that's what they've already learned in your class, maybe you just give them a particular question. It could be them doing this at the beginning or at the end of class. So after you've already given everything out, and maybe they just need to spend time, 3 minutes, just writing down what they've learned for the class. I've seen some instructors do this at the beginning of the next class, where they actually do it for 3 minutes and remember what they learned in the last class as well. So there's a lot of different ways you can do the 3 minute, and you can change the time up too if you want. The next one is called brain dump, and it's basically where the students just take what they learned and then dump it onto the paper. So maybe that it's similar to a 3 minute paper, but it's just kind of dumping out all of your ideas. Some of it might make sense, some of it may not, but the students are getting it all out and getting it all out on the paper to be able to do that. And I've heard of some instructors doing that almost every single day, just giving the chance for students to just dump out all the stuff that they've been learning. One of the next ones is called questions on the topic. And so maybe a particular topic, whether you've already covered the topic or you haven't, have the students come up with a couple of questions ahead of time. They could actually give them to you. They might even talk about them with other students in the class and try to answer them themselves, but have them come up with some of the questions before. That could be helpful. The next one is called picture prompt. And so rather than having the students write out stuff, you could actually have the students find a picture or create a picture that has to do with that particular topic or that particular concept. So I usually do, because we cover areas of wellness, I teach choosing wellness, and I do this one activity where the students have to find pictures on each of the areas of wellness. And so if they're looking at physical wellness, then they'll find pictures that have to do with physical wellness. And so it's the picture prompt. The next one is real world connections. And so being able to have them connect content that you're learning into their own environment, into their own world, absolutely can be helpful. One of the activities I do in my class as well is them looking at health issues, problems and issues. And one of the things they have to do is they have to connect it to college students. So how is this health issue, this problem, affect college students? And so they actually connect it that way. And so it's a real world connection as well. And then the last one is the think, pair, share. So just being able to think about it, but then being able to get in a group, maybe just one other person, and then being able to share out as well is a great activity to do as well. So a couple of examples. Here's one that I do in my class. I call it article of the day. I don't usually do it every single class period, but usually maybe once a week. I'll find an article, a research article, usually having to do with a topic that either we've already covered or that we're going to cover. I give it to them at the end of class, and then by the next class, they have to come back having read it. And then what I do is I give them these 3 questions. They have to write those down. So why do you believe that this research is important? How does it apply to your own life? And what other questions do you have or still wondering about? And so they write these down. And then what I actually do is I actually pair them up, or I can say that's you can go into groups of 2 to 3, not more than 3. And then I'll actually tell them, all right, now it's time, you guys, I'm going to give you 8 to 10 minutes. You go out of class, go take a walk, discuss your answers on this. And when you come back, we'll actually talk about it in class. And so it gives the students an opportunity, even outside the class, to be able to have that discussion. And my class is about wellness, so I don't necessarily want to have them sitting the entire time. And so they get up, they go do their thing, and then they come back. Sometimes we discuss it, sometimes we don't. The next one I love being able to have an opportunity for them to look at the learning outcomes of the course. You know, we give them this long syllabus. Chances are they might not go through much of it at all. But we have these outcomes that go with our class. And having an activity, I think, to get them right away within the first week, looking at those outcomes and starting to measure them up is great. And so I'll do this individually, and then sometimes I'll do this as a group as well, where I'll have them look at them. And maybe one of the activities is which ones are you most familiar with, or you feel most comfortable with? Which ones are you least comfortable with? Maybe it's which do you feel like are the most important? I could even have them rate them as well. So I could do multiple things, but I'm giving them a chance to actually look at, see what I'm hoping that they're going to learn from a broad term, what they're going to learn in my class. And so we want to take a look at, but let me go ahead and I'm going to pull this up. This is called Draw It. This is an activity. And so you can go ahead and start it. So down below, you'll see like a text tool and a pen tool. But what you can do is you can give the students something like this and actually ask them to go ahead and engage with it. And so what it does is individually allows the students to start to draw on it or put some text on it and then submit it to you so you can actually see it. And so once you're finished, or once they're finished and you have them all submit their work, then what you can actually do is showcase that particular work. And so it's a great way to get the students engaged in some sort of activity like this. You can put a picture up there. You can put just about anything up there, have the students work on it. And then once they work on it, then you can showcase that. The great part about it is the fact that it does remove the name from it once you go to show it. So this tool is all about anonymity, and I've used multiple other tools. And I think, you know, being able to allow the students to share, and if they feel comfortable sharing and they're not going to necessarily be called out, they'll probably be a little bit more honest with you and as far as what they're working on. And so that's this tool here. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one. The next one's called student responses. And so student responses are just that. We're trying to get some sort of response from the students, whether it's individual responses or even responses from an entire group after they've discussed something. So what are some activities, student response activities that you've used in your course before? Kahoot? Okay, good. Mentimeter? That's a good one. Socrative, about poll, Kahoot, poll everywhere, Flipgrid. In class discussion boards, go Formative, VoiceThread, good. Polls, Flipgrid, Quizlet, good, good, good. These are definitely some great tools that allow students to do student response. If you didn't know, there's a new feature in Zoom called Apps Built in to Zoom. And it's a feature you can just turn on in settings. And but once you turn it on, Kahoot is actually one of the apps can be directly built into Zoom. You notice whenever you share or when you want students to interact, it's usually not, if it's not one of the simple tools that's built into Zoom, they have to open up a separate browser. Whereas now they have a few different apps that are built directly into Zoom, and Kahoot is actually one of those. So if you're doing in your Zoom class and you want to do a Kahoot, you can actually build it directly in, and then the students can be engaged with those. So, all right, great. Well, thanks for sharing those. So here are just a few, some of the ones that you already mentioned were different polling tools that we have. I'm going to skip breakout rooms just for a second and go into Four Corners. This one I really like in the classroom, where you can actually have four corners in the classroom and ask a particular question, and the students, they get 4 choices, and they get to go to that particular corner that's the choice that they pick. And so you could actually, once they get to that corner, you could just move on to the next question, or you can actually have that group discuss that particular topic and then possibly share it out. And so I've done it both ways, where I've just had the students go there so everybody sees what their answer is, or I've had them go to the corner that their particular answer is, and then spend 5 minutes as a discussion with the other students about that, and actually be able to share that back out with the class. I've done it before where there's a whiteboard in the corner, and once they got there, then they actually had to write down maybe the pros and cons of their answer. And then they got a chance to share that out with the class as well. So that's a great one. Another one is just a digital whiteboard. So, you know, Zoom has a whiteboard built in. There's multiple other types of whiteboard, but having a whiteboard where students can actually share responses to you absolutely is powerful. There's another tool called Jamboard, which is by Google. So if you have a Google account, you can use that one in your class. Microsoft now has one called Whiteboard that you could use that one in class as well. So you have several different whiteboard style whiteboards that you can use in your class. And the one that we're using for responses is similar to a whiteboard as well. It's more of a post-it note type of thing. And then the last one is breakout rooms. And so if you have the students and they're online, you know, on Zoom, and you want to have them get into groups, go ahead and use the breakout rooms, have them discuss their answers, and then they could come back to the group and actually share out their student responses. So breakout rooms now, I think they have an option for students even to go to their particular choice. So you could do a 4 corners style thing in Zoom, where I could have 4 groups and give them a question, and then the students that wanted to answer a particular question, they could go to that group, and then they could have the discussion there. So you can flip it and actually use that in Zoom as well. One of the things I didn't say earlier is definitely continue to look at some of these, because most of these can be used regardless of whether it's face-to-face or online. They can go both ways. And some stuff can even be used asynchronously, and you could get the students some feedback. So you could ask the students to fill out some sort of polling tool ahead of time, so you can kind of gauge where they're at. So the next one is student creation activities. And so I love this one here. Giving the students options and being creative with what the students can create to show you that they've learned that content. It's not just about taking a test, but being able to create something, I think excites a lot of students. I know project-based learning is big, and having the students do different projects and things is huge, but let me ask you all, what student creation activities have you all used before in your courses? Build a website, good. It could just be something really small, and it could be something really big. Creating a marketing plan, okay, good. Write simple songs, that's cool. Mock court procedure, good, good. Created something, okay. Presentations on multiple topics, good. Write a group sestina, a virtual gallery, cool. Creating a role play activity for negotiating concept. Role play scenarios, good. All right, good. Those are definitely good. Keep them coming. Yeah, absolutely. Created a coloring book. Oh, there you go. Rewrite history. Scroll down here. Start to get below my screen here. Mock debates. Cool. And diagrams. Infographics. There's a lot. I mean, really, when you start to think about it, there's a ton of different options that you can do to take what they've learned in your class and allow them to create something. Interviews of historical composes, conference proposals, PSA video. Excellent. The why technique. Okay. Good. All right, so let's go ahead and I'll move to the next slide. So here are just a few ones that I came up with of different options, like, and some of these you actually said already. Somebody said an infographic, and I said infographic comparing and contrasting a topic, record a podcast or video explaining how to solve a problem, picture collage representing a theme. You know, there's a lot of different free tools out there that students could use to be able to create some of this kind of stuff. Presentation on a problem or an issue, write a persuasive letter to a friend about their opinion on a topic, create a mind map representing how key information connects to each other, scavenger hunt, newscast, interviewing students and family and topic. I love this one. I did this one in my class before, where I actually had the students, they had some sort of problem or an issue, and they actually had to create an informative news piece on it. And they actually had to go out and interview other students or family or friends for it. So that was kind of cool and fun. All right, so let's go on to group activities. So group activities, self-explanatory. So what are some group activities you all do in your course?
Greg, can I talk instead of typing it? Because I think it would be too long.
No, that's okay. Absolutely. Great.
And I think it kind of uses a whole bunch of the other activities too. So we do, we have to find a problem for a company, and the students then have to find alternatives to fix that problem. So we do sticky notes, and they brain dump on the sticky notes every way they could fix the problem. Then they stick them on the board, and then they start to kind of talk about it. What's yes, this would actually fix the problem. No, this one was silly, or maybe. And then that whole group moves to the other companies around the room, and then they kind of, instead of the CEO of their own company, they become consultants of the other companies. And they can make check notes, like checks on, yes, this would be a yes, or they create their own sticky notes, like maybe this would fix your problem, and they just move kind of around the room. And then by the end, they all have a whole bunch of alternatives, and even some they didn't think of, and then the support of other classmates saying, yes, that was a great idea, something like that.
Yeah, that's a great, that's a great idea.
Of that out. And it only takes like 30 minutes.
Yeah, and that's a great way, you know, of explaining how several of these can fit together. So when you start to look at these, sometimes you can combine multiple, you start out and get them to think about certain things, but it can build up to ultimately even creating something. And so I love the idea of them dumping it out and using those sticky notes to be able to just put that all out there and then sort it. And so great. Thanks for sharing, Kelly.
What a terrific collaborative activity where they have to negotiate their own understandings and meanings. And that's really awesome. I'm curious, Greg, I had never heard of the why activity. Can whoever that was tell us what that was on the previous previous page? I think it was on the student creations.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hey, John,
Yes.
thank you.
Hi. The Y technique, it goes back many years, but actually it was started in Japan when they were into their total quality stuff. But if you want to look for root causes of things, let's say you have a problem, you ask why at least 5 times. So the first response, why, leads to the second why, which leads to the third why. It's a root cause technique. And
Interesting.
it's collaborative. You know, you get 4 or 5 or 6 people at a flip chart or a whiteboard and just stand back and watch all the fun.
Oh, what a great activity.
Thank
That's
you.
great. Thanks for sharing, John. All right, so let's see here. We got 8 minutes left, so we'll try to move quickly. We're almost finished. So thanks for sharing on here, group presentations and projects and interviews. Rewriting fairy tales, that sounds cool. And then creating a podcast. Peer feedback, the Jigsaw, that's a great way to do a group activity. Collaborative grading, rubric creation based on the assignment description, that's a good one. Collaborative grading on the group presentations, absolutely, that's good. All right, so let's take a look at a few examples. So for those who don't know Jigsaw, and so this one, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but basically it's like you think of a puzzle that goes together. And so what you're doing is you're breaking the students up into different groups. And so the standard way to do a jigsaw could be like groups of 4 to 6 in a group. And then what you have is you break down the content into 4 to 6 areas. And each student gets a particular area that they read through or learn. And then ultimately what they do is they come back to that particular group and they discuss it with them. So if it's a passage that breaks down into 4 pieces, I'd have 4 people in a group. Each one takes a section of it, and then they discuss it with the rest of the group. And then you can always mix it up after that as well. The next one is called carousel brainstorming, which is kind of cool. And so everyone in the group, and so you put them in groups, and everyone in the group writes out a problem statement and then passes their problem statement to the next person, where that person records a possible answer or idea. And then after they've done that, then they move that sheet of paper to the next person, and then they share out an idea, and it kind of moves forward from there. One of the activities I do that's similar to this is I'll actually have the students mention a particular problem or an issue that they know of, and then they share it out with the class, and then 3 or 4 other people put down solutions for it, and then give it back to the student at the end of class. And so it's kind of a same effect of brainstorming different ideas. The next one is just teaching in pairs, getting the students to teach what they've learned to a peer. And so it's kind of self-explanatory. The next one is group discussion shuffle. And so what you would have is maybe every table works on the same task for a few minutes, and then there's a debrief with the whole class, and then you can move on to the next one. Or what you can do is you can shuffle up the groups a little bit and have the students break up and do different, make sure that there's different people in different groups, and then throw out another topic and have them discuss it as well. So you're kind of shuffling things up. The next one's empty table, where they're actually, you give them a table that could have a header, and some rows, and then the students actually insert their answers to it. I use this sometimes in class on a whiteboard. I'll create the table, and then the students actually have to fill it out and discuss it as a group as well. But you could do this online also. And then the last one is the snowball discussion, where you start out in just pairs and they discuss it. And then you say, okay, now 2 sets of pairs get together. So there's 4, and then they discuss it. And then you bring it to, and then ultimately to the whole class. And so it's called the snowball discussion. Here's one activity that I actually do with my students where we go over the syllabus, and then, and actually I think I do this even before I go over my expectations, but you know, what are the participation expectations, what are the assignments, and what are the attendance? And I'll even ask them, what do you think should be the expectation for participation, or the expectation for turning in your assignments and getting your work done, or your expectation for attendance? It's always interesting to hear what they're going to come up with. But I'm going to skip this for the interest of time because we only have a few more minutes. And then the last one is simulations. And so if you haven't already done so, I highly recommend having a chance to talk to Emily Kochansky, who's our simulation specialist, and take a look and see if it's something that would fit with into your course. And I'm guessing that almost everyone, if not everyone here, this simulation could fit somewhere in your course. If you're working on sort of communication skills or problem solving skills or interpersonal skills or leadership skills, this could fit. We have it used from business and marketing to hospitality to accounting to journalism and theater and social work and criminal justice. And so there's a lot of different areas that we've done simulations. Every single college uses it and multiple programs use it. So before the end of the night, in a few minutes, I'll pull up I'll find the link and I'll share it to you all in the chat. So that is the simulations. So any other ideas? I know we only have 2 more minutes, but any other ideas that you all have, or even questions that you all might have about implementing active learning strategies into your course?
I would just like
You can
to
come off
say,
and-
if you haven't used Emily and her group, you should. She did an amazing job in one of my classes. It's so fun. At first, the kids were a little iffy, like, what is happening? And then when they got rolling and she started asking them questions, or the Shark Tank people started asking them questions, they really got into it. It was good fun.
That's cool. She said she had a lot of fun doing that one. Yeah, it definitely makes it unique when you can take and think about this too. So it can be just as simple as the students working a little bit on some of their soft skills, or it could be to the level of being a full summative assessment. There's at least one business course that actually uses this, I believe, either as their midterm or final exam, because it wraps a culmination of almost everything that they've learned in the class into this scenario, because it's pieces of their marketing and all that kind of stuff that goes right into it. So let's see here. We have using Padlet for students to share the outcomes of their group discussion. Great. Simulations commonly involved in role playing, something that needs to be monitored closely. So is that a question, John?
Yes and no. What do you want it to be?
Okay.
I'm just
Well,
kidding.
okay. I
When
wasn't
you get
sure if
involved,
you were asking.
when you get involved in role playing, it can go too far.
Yes.
So the ground rules for the simulation need to be clear and specific, and you need to be careful of when the role kind of takes over the simulation.
Well, and that's
This is-
actually, oh, go ahead, John.
No, it's something that's been well established in behavioral science.
Mm-hmm. It's actually one of the great things about the simulated experiences program with the avatars, because the professor discusses with the simulation specialist exactly how far they want to go and what they want to have happen. And it's much more controlled than when you have students role playing on students. You don't have to worry about inappropriate responses or interactions or bias that comes in, unintended or intended. It's just a lot more controllable. And it really, the students aren't actors. Emily is a trained actress. She can draw on all sorts of experiences and resources. Now, she depends on the faculty member to clarify what the goals of that session are and what are the trigger points, what are the kinds of responses that would be appropriate for that player, if you will, or that that actor. But it's a pretty cool way to do simulations.
Yeah, and if you're just thinking about, go ahead.
Okay, thanks for that. I wasn't trying to turn anybody off to using simulations. They are very powerful, but there can be a dark side to them. And it sounds like, avatars, that's great, but just the simulations also are very time consuming to do them right.
Yeah, and depending on how elaborate you want to get, I mean, depending on what you want them to do, definitely. But if anybody's interested, absolutely reach out to myself or Emily, and we can even just take a look and have that initial conversation to see if it makes sense. I usually tell people to look at your learning outcomes and decide if one would possibly fit with having the students do something like this. And so I have shared a couple of links with you all. Thanks for sharing that too, Daniel. As far as the simulations we posted there, our website on active learning is there as well, because there's multiple links there about activities, whether it's within Zoom. There's one in there that has a professor from USF that created this document. It's like a 6-page or 7-page document with over 270 different learning strategies. He calls them interactive techniques. It's a great one, and that's actually where I got a few of the ideas that we shared out here. And then our instructional guide that's about the hybrid learning, and there's a piece in there too about learner engagement and active learning strategies as well. So we'll hang on the line for a minute or two more, but if y'all don't have any other questions, we really appreciate y'all coming, and definitely we're going to be excited. We'll be posting the link to the recording probably tomorrow, and then we'll also be posting the slides in there as well. So be on the lookout for those in the team. Anything else, Candace?
No, just thank you for coming, everyone. We look forward to meeting with you next week. We'll be focusing on active learning strategies and building classroom community and answering any questions you have. Don't forget to reach out to us if you're, if you need some help. That's what we're here for. We want to be able to help you create the best course that you can create.